As Christians, we're called to represent God's kingdom on this earth. At the same time, we have our earthly leaders that we're supposed to be subject to, and we know that there's no authority except that which God has established. So how should we as Christians cast our vote when we get to be part of deciding for our leaders? Well, Stephen Strang is with us. He's the founder of Charisma Media. In his new book, God, Trump, and the 2020 Election, he lays out the case of why he believes Donald Trump must win and what is at stake for Christians if he loses. Stephen, welcome back to real life.
Thank you. It's a privilege.
You know, I have to ask you, obviously make America great again. I have to ask you this question. Why does God want America to be great? I believe he does, but why does God want America to be great?
Because God had a plan for America going all the way back to the founding of this country. And the framers of the Constitution actually put freedom of religion, which has allowed religion to prosper. America has become a great country financially, so that Christians have had the money to spend to send the gospel around the world. Mm-hmm. And also, America has been a great, like a light on a hill, a shining light on a hill. You know, the fact that we send the Ukraine $1 billion is from the same impulse that causes Christians to send missionaries around the world. It comes from our Judeo-Christian values. But yet something's happened, especially on what I'll call the left, where they're like ashamed of America. It's not a great nation. You remember that Barack Obama went on an apology tour. Yeah. And if America just becomes another country, first of all, bad guys are going to pop up all over the world, but also the gospel is not going to go forth. Now, that's not something you read about in the secular media,
right.
But because I'm a Christian journalist, a Christian writer, I bring that out. It's not just about politics. It's really about the spiritual dimension of what's happening in our country.
It's interesting, having studied some history, even a lot of the constitutions around the world are based on the American Constitution. There's so much that America has kind of bequeathed to the world.
Even in Venezuela, which was the greatest country in South America, and now it's a socialist country with 10 million% inflation. Oh, and what happened was, they had an immigration problem from Colombia because of the Civil War. These people were very poor. They wanted the government to give everything. The socialists promised them that. And then as soon as they get in, they did away with the Constitution or changed it drastically. And I tell about in God, Trump, the 2020 election, that if we go the socialist route, and I didn't think I'd live long enough to see a prominent socialist in our political system, let alone two running for president. And the thing is that the pendulum seems to swing between Democrat and Republican every so often. And there is a very real concern that I have that a socialist might get in. And if that happens, all bets are off.
Yeah, I lived in New Hampshire when Bernie Sanders was in Vermont as the mayor of Burlington and then other positions. And I think he was an independent then.
Well, he still is. He only became a Democrat to run for the presidency. Even after the last election, he went back to being an independent. And then he switched back to being...
Well, let's talk about, we'll get to talking about the president in a second here, but I want to ask about ideologies because people say, oh, well, socialists, you know, what's that? And, I mean, I'm with you. I never thought we'd have a day where it would say a socialist and not...
Someone said that a socialist is a communist without a gun. You know, it's diametrically opposed to everything we think of. Now, our capitalistic society and our big government gives a lot of stuff to people, and we have a safety net. Most of the Western countries have some kind of safety net. But that is a far cry from a socialist government where they own everything, they control every part of our lives, and they restrict religious freedom. Tell me the socialist country in the world that has religious freedom. There aren't any. If anything, they tolerate it a little bit. And that's what we face in America. And right now, like it or not, Donald Trump is our champion. He's the one who's running. And it isn't so much to get him in again, although I think that he's accomplished great things. I have a chapter in the book called Promises Made, Promises Kept. He has a character trait most politicians don't have. He actually keeps his promises. But it isn't that. It's what the alternative is. And that is often what you have to deal with in politics, this more so than any election in our lifetime.
Well, let me ask you, what are the stakes? As we come into the 2020 election? And you had mentioned the president is a very divisive personality, and in many cases because of his personality.
No, I disagree.
Okay.
He's not the reason for the division. It already existed.
Sure.
The nation was heading in the wrong direction for the last 50 years at least, and maybe back to Woodrow Wilson. And Donald Trump is an outsider who's causing he's a disruptor. Disruptors disrupt. So all this stuff is coming to the surface. If Hillary Clinton had won, we would have never found out about the corruption in the CIA and the FBI. That ought to put a chill down the back of every American, that the biggest, most powerful police agencies that are supposed to guard our rights are actually doing things that are just wrong. Now, that hasn't worked its way all through the legal system, but you know, I think there's proof that there were some very serious wrongs, and we would have never known about it. There's a lot of things going in our government we've never known about, but Donald Trump seems to have a way to bring that to the surface. And it's not just political, but it's trade, it's having our allies pay a lot of this money that really ought to be going to our own country. You know, there are taxes, but also when it comes to religious rights. Now, the secular media and the secular culture, they don't care. They don't go to church anyway, you know. But for us Christians, this is the most important thing. There are laws in Canada that are hate laws that have been proposed here. Thank God they haven't passed yet. But it's going to happen. If the other side gets in, it will happen. And we have to realize this. Look what he did with the March for Life just a few days ago.
Right.
He was the first president. You know, he said he would stand for life, and he has. So much so that he even went out there and spoke in person. Now, a couple of the other presidents sent a video or something, but
yeah, I think I was at one that Reagan waved from the porch. I remember that one in particular in the 80s.
But they were always timid. They would kind of, this is a way they could compromise with the other side. Someone said that the pro-life movement is a black sheep of the Republican Party, and it really is. There's something wrong about associating too close. But Donald Trump doesn't seem to care. If he believes in something, he's going to back it. He doesn't care what the other side says or what the consequences are.
Well, let's talk about President Trump, because frankly, we've seen certain snippets on the news and things like that, and some people could say, well, that's the news media, they don't like him. But it's him saying things or tweeting things or doing things that seem impolite at best, and so what are we to make of this man? That, you know, and you have a chapter about the real Donald Trump. So could you just speak to that?
Well, what you see is what you get. You know, he's authentic. Tell me the politicians that are authentic. You know, they say one thing and act another way behind the scenes. Now, I happen to like his tweets. I think they're funny. And I'm so glad that he's standing up to the bullies on the other side. Now, does he use a few words that I wouldn't use? Has he done things in his past that he shouldn't have done? Of course. But, you know, a lot of your viewers may not know how powerful Christian television is, but he actually was exposed to the gospel through Christian television. Jim Baker, Ken and Gloria Copeland, David Jeremiah, Paula White Cain, they all have confirmed that Donald Trump told them that he watched them. And I think that something took place in his heart. He became more serious about life. He also felt that he needed to step up and try to make this country go in a different direction, and that's exactly what he's done. I interviewed him in 2016. He was not the bombastic personality. He was respectful, and you know, he didn't really know charisma before we asked for the interview, but he was respectful. He felt that it was important that he answer my questions. And I talked to him one time on the telephone as well, and he was like that. And people who know him much better than I do, I interviewed them, and he's really a nice guy. People are very loyal to him. I was not always a Trump fan. You know, I knew him as his position in the media when he did The Apprentice and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know him very well. I didn't like him. But he has exceeded expectations. A lot of us voted for him because he wasn't Hillary Clinton, and we felt we had no option. But he's exceeded expectations. Look what he's doing in Israel. Look at the judges he's put in. Look at the trade things that he has negotiated. You know, in 1 week, a historic trade agreement with both China and here in North America with Canada and Mexico. I mean, it's amazing. Look at the economy. The economy is amazing, and we have Donald Trump. And so we're going to throw that away because he says a couple of words that a lot of other people say on TV as well? I don't think so. And I think that people that focus on that are doing what the Bible says of straining gnats and swallowing camels. I really believe that. And I think that the Christian community needs to wake up, needs to become more mature, needs to see things clearly, and also to see even God's hand on this man. I think that there's divine protection around him, or he couldn't put up with the endless attacks. Any other president would be in the fetal position in the Oval Office with the continuing attacks he gets, but he seems to thrive on it. And I believe, and I go into it in the book in a whole section, I believe, and I think I can make a good point if we had time to go into it, maybe another segment, of that God has his hand on this very unlikely man that God has raised up.
Well, we'll be taking a break, but we've got a lot more we can get to, certainly. So we'll have another segment with you. We'll be back. But right now, we're going to take a break to Sydney in the news.
President Trump signed a bill authorizing $375 million in grants for houses of worship to defend against violence. Trump said, quote, "In face of attacks on synagogues, mosques, and churches, something that is just so horrible, we must work together to reject the monstrous evils of anti-Semitism and anti-religious bigotry." The bill allows churches and other houses of worship to apply for $100,000 grants to be used for things like cameras, stronger doors, and hiring security professionals. Now let's head over back to Tom.
Well, we're back with Stephen Strang, and Jay's joining us here. Stephen, what are, with some of the issues, well, you know what, before I go to the issues, I have to ask you, at the time of this taping, we're in the middle of the hearings related to the impeachment. And in fact, the John Bolton situation just came. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about
I think he'll survive it. He survives everything else. And there's, you know, the main thing comes down to the two things they've accused him of are not impeachable offenses. I heard someone say that if I offend you and you sue me and want to impeach me, maybe I did offend you, but that's not an impeachable offense. And just finding out that he did something that's not impeachable, even the thing with Bolton, if it ends up being true, is not impeachable. They say he abused power. What does that mean? You know, it means he has the power of the presidency and he did things that the other person thinks is abuse. It's not even a crime. And then obstruction of Congress is called the separation of powers. You know, and they're wanting, because he's asking courts to look into it and so forth, they're saying he's abused Congress. Is absolutely ridiculous. But the thing, even, he'll survive this because they need 67 votes for an impeachment. But if it went through, anytime one party got control of Congress, they could impeach the president if it was a different party. That would be very dangerous to undo elections just that way. And these people, you know, it's political because they were talking about it before he was inaugurated. Yeah. And what is it? 20 minutes after he, you know, raised his hand and swore the oath, the Washington Post put something online that says the campaign for impeachment has begun. I mean, how more blatant could it be? And, you know, it's like if he found the cure for cancer, they'd say that he was putting doctors out of work. You know, I mean, it's just like anything he does, and it's political. They know they can't beat him in November, and they're just trying to damage him. And I think it's terrible what they're putting people through. I think there's a possibility that they'll be punished at the polls, but there's no certainty of that. I mean, you know, I would have thought that this whole thing would have wound down a long time ago after the Mueller investigation and so forth came out clean. If you'll notice, in the articles of impeachment, there's nothing about quid pro quo. There's nothing about Russian collusion, nothing. And if there was a shred of evidence, they would have put it in there. So I think that he'll win, but I have a chapter in my book on why he might lose. And part of it is just the corruption on the other side. Part of it is if Christian people stay home, Christians and other conservatives who might think, hey, you know, my vote doesn't count, or the other side's so crazy, there's nobody that would vote for them. We've got to go out and vote. And also there's some other reasons too. Social media censorship is one, and of course I go into it in the book.
You know, in 2006, I'm sure you probably heard about the prophecies from Kim Clement. I'm sure you've heard those, and how he had prophesied that he would not only get into office, but that they would shout, impeach, impeach, but God said that it wouldn't come to fruition. So we're going to see how that prophecy plays out as time goes on. But I have a question for you because...
There's a whole chapter in the book about
is there? Okay.
that and Kim Clement.
Well, why he must win. A lot of people in the church, there are some people that are for him, some people that are against him. And as you think about why he must win, people look at the different things he does on Twitter and social media and all these things, and they feel because of that, he's not the model Christian. Then why should the church vote for him? Why should we endorse him? So why do you take such a strong stand on the fact that he must win?
Because of the alternative. And which president was perfect? Which president was not presidential in some way? We're not, this is not, he's not an actor who's supposed to act a certain way. You know, I had a friend that made an argument a little bit similar to you, and my reaction was, who do you want, Mr. Rogers? You know, we need a leader. And
He's a Pittsburgher. He's from Pittsburgh. We like Mr. Rogers around here.
And he went to college in Orlando. We claim him too. So he's a strong leader. That's why the economy's turning around. But let's say that the Nazis were running, you know, on the other side. I mean, let's think of the worst thing. I mean, at what point do we say bad enough is bad enough to overlook really personality traits? But I'll tell you what. For everyone who doesn't like him, there's people who do like him. I've been to a couple of his rallies. We see him on TV. I mean, the enthusiasm level, there'll be 10,000 people outside, and the Democrats can't even get that many unless they bring in some kind of celebrity. I mean, it's amazing. But we have a political divide. I really think that there are a lot of people on the other side who want to bring our country down. They want to undo a lot of our Judeo-Christian values, and we need to wake up, see what they're doing, and look beyond some of these superficial things that people criticize.
Well, let me ask you, even in the evangelical community, there's not, I mean, the evangelical community largely supported Trump in the
81 or 82%.
But then you have situations like Christianity Today writing an article in favor of impeachment, and you know, what do you make of things
Christianity
like that?
Today is the competitor of Charisma magazine and has been for 4 decades. I know these people pretty well. I know Mark Galli personally. These are liberals. They've always been liberal. They always voted Democrat. Now, they wouldn't endorse anyone because they're nonprofit and they could have lost their nonprofit, but look at their articles. And I was very, very disappointed that they did this. They kind of demonized people like you and me who supported Trump, said that the only Trump supporters they knew only had high school educations and had minimum wages if they weren't unemployed. I mean, how demeaning is that? But he finally came out. He said he should be removed from office because he's not the right kind of person. My question to Mark Galli is, who out there, including some people who aren't running, could jump in and win? There is no one else. And if we vote for a third party, are they any better? And of course, a third party, if you vote for a third party, you're voting for whoever ends up winning because your vote didn't help the other person. And I think we need to think clearly. But you know, Jim Wallace and Sojourners and that part, they call themselves the elite evangelicals. And they frankly look down their noses. Listen, I know these people up close and personal. They look down their noses, even on like ministries like yours and others that aren't elites. And they don't believe in the baptism of the Holy Spirit. They don't believe in miracles. They don't believe any of that. And this is just kind of carried over to the political realm. I'm probably not saying it very well, but I just don't pay them any attention. And frankly, in the circles that I move in the charismatic and Pentecostal and politically conservative, they don't carry any clout at all. It didn't change any minds. And even Mark Galli himself in an interview admitted that he doubted anybody would change their mind.
Well, you know, one of the things that about President Trump that I appreciate, while he doesn't show a lot of the Christian values as far as living them out in a discipleship way that we would, loving our neighbor and things along that line, but he stands for the church. One of the things, he stood for Israel, he stands for the church and what the church believes and all those types of things. So my question to you with that is, it says here, why he must win, what's at stake for Christians if he loses? What's at stake for, what are we going to lose, you're saying, in this book, if he doesn't win?
We're going to lose him putting in more good judges. Israel won't have as strong a friend. There's hate law legislation. There's something called the Equality Act. I go into that in the book, God, Trump, and the 2020 election. Every single Democrat in the House voted for it. Now, it wasn't able to pass. But it basically made, if you did not agree with the LGBT agenda, it was hate speech. and you could be shut down in different ways. Canada already has some of these
Yeah,
laws.
That's right. They
And
do.
some of the countries in Europe. It
Yeah.
will happen here. And
If he doesn't get in, you're saying?
if he well, it's not so much if he doesn't get in, because after 2025, he won't be in anyway. If the other side gets in it, and actually, we need to pray that God raises up righteous people in the other party. We need a
Amen.
good
Amen.
Amen.
we need a good two-party system, but they run off anybody that's pro-life. They run them off. And the ones that are way up high are not godly at all. Tell me any of them that are godly. Only Pete Buttigieg even talks about church. And in my opinion, he's certainly not godly.
Let me ask you about Bloomberg, who's jumped in the race here, and all of a sudden he's running these big ads, and he's got a lot of money to do that. Why is he in, and can he just jump in and get the nomination?
Well, the book was written before he jumped in, and I don't deal at all with the Democratic side because, of course, I have no way of knowing who's going to get the nomination. I actually think he's going to get it, and I said so on Fox News last week. And, you know, that's just a hunch, but at least he's a capitalist. And I think that the Democrats are going to wake up and say we cannot put a socialist in, even though a segment of their people want that. And Bloomberg has so much money he can buy the election.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for diving into this interesting issue. Controversial issue, controversial in many ways. I'd like you to join us for our prayer time at the end of the program.
Thank you.
Yes.